Well, hello everyone, and thanks for taking the time to tune back in to my YouTube channel. Now, in this featured video, we're going to take a look at one of the most iconic motorcycles from the 1970s. This, of course, is Husqvarna's superb 400 Cross motorcycle. Now, as off-road motorcycle racing evolved through the 1960s and 1970s, this of course was the period before the Japanese manufacturers came to be involved in the sport. At this time, of course, European bikes ruled the motocross tracks of the world. The Swedish Husqvarna manufacturer came to epitomise the success of motorcycles developed exclusively for racing in closed course competitions. Husqvarna motorcycles also won 14 motocross and 24 enduro titles through the late 1970s. Now, of course, these 400 Cross Husqvarna motorcycles are well known as one of Hollywood film star Steve McQueen's favourite dirt bikes. Steve just loved these ultra lightweight chassis and the power delivery from that Husky motor, which he said made them well suited for his desert racing. Now, Steve of course also featured these machines heavily in that legendary movie of the time, On Any Sunday, which was really the film that put Husqvarna on the map. The sales of this model were absolutely huge in the USA at the time. Now, of course, riders at the time also said that this 400 Cross Husqvarna machine was quite difficult to ride well, although the legendary Mr. McQueen was of course the exception, and he had no such problems. Now, the other claim to fame for these 400 Cross Husqvarnas were, of course, these were piloted by the legendary Bengt Aberg to a World Championship victory in 1969 and 1970 in the 500cc World Motocross Championships. Now, of course, the 400 Cross was essentially an evolution of the earlier Husqvarna 360 Cross that was introduced in 1966. Before this time, the most popular off-road racing motorcycles were just typically road-going bikes that had been modified with knobbly tyres and braced handlebars, along with some suspension changes and any other ways riders could find to save weight. Now, of course, visually, the Husky 400 Cross and the 360 Cross look almost identical, but one of the most common ways to identify which model you had was to stick your thumb between the barrel and the head, with the engine cold of course, and if your thumb fits in it, then it's a 400, and of course if it doesn't, then you've got yourself a 360. Now, of course, this was also a period before plastics were used in off-road dirt bikes, so these Husqvarnas had sculpted alloy fuel tanks, and of course they also had this iconic polished section to help reduce scraping where the rider's leg would rub against the fuel tank. And naturally, this red and polished metal combination on the tank of these Husqvarnas would go on to be an iconic symbol of many more of their future models through the 1970s. Now, Steve McQueen's original 400 Cross Husqvarna from that iconic film On Any Sunday was recently up for sale at auction, and although the original purchase price for one of these 400 bikes in the 1970s was approximately $1,385, Steve's particular bike was sold at auction to a very lucky buyer for the princely sum of $230,000 in October 2018. The original specs of these machines, it had a cylinder capacity of 396 cc's of course, and was reputed to be capable of 40 brake horsepower. Now it also had a 36mm Bing carburetor and a bore and stroke of 81 by 76mm. Now I know 40 brake horsepower doesn't sound like much, but the motor only had to contend with a dry curb weight of 231 pounds, and the extremely light handling frame made this 400 cross machine second to none. Surviving examples of these very rare 400 cross Husqvarnas are still today commanding good prices if you can catch a decent original bike. Although sadly, many of these machines spend their time as show bikes and are never ridden, while others are locked away in museum type collections and are destined never to be raced on motocross tracks ever again. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this very brief look at one of Husqvarna's most iconic models, the 400 Cross. This video was brought to you in association with VMX Magazine, the world's #1 publication for all your classic and vintage dirt bike motorcycles.